The views and opinions expressed on Maine Challenge are solely those of the program participants and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions of Lincoln County Television, its employees, or the producers of this program. Maine Challenge is a production of Lincoln County Indivisible.
Coming up next on Maine Challenge, our interview with candidate Craig Hickman, who is running for the state Senate in a special election on March 9th. Good morning and welcome to Maine Challenge. Today, I'm so excited and honored to have as my guest Craig Hickman, a longtime friend and colleague who has been in the House of Representatives in Maine for the last 8 years and has stepped up now to be a candidate for the Maine State Senate in a seat that was vacated as Shannon Bellows went to be Secretary of State. So he is in a special election that's happening on March 9th. Many of you know Craig. He has become a voice of the people. He has been doing incredible work. And Craig, I am just honored and thrilled to see you and have you here, my friend. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning, Betsy. It's really great to be here to join you this morning. I look forward to our conversation.
Great. So Craig, we all know that you have done, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, what you've done as a state representative. But so here we are in the middle of this pandemic. We are in the middle of, let's say, upheaval on the national political scene. A lot of people, when they hear about politics, they're like, no, it's toxic, it's awful. And yet you, who Craig is a farmer, organic farmer, he is a poet, he is an incredible orator, he feeds, he's one of the founders of the food sovereignty movement. And yet when they asked you to step up to run for the Senate seat, you said yes. So why? How come, what is it that you believe about our democracy, and at this time when a lot of people want to run away, that you actually decided to go toward the fire, not away from it?
Well, I love a challenge. That's number one. When you have a community that has embraced you wholeheartedly when you had no idea they would. And when, of course, I also ran for Secretary of State, and Shannon Bellows beat me, and then she outsmarted the field and she got the votes. And I thought that therefore I was going to retire. But when President Jackson first asked, and then community members just lobbied me to no end and said, you have to run, I talked to my husband and we decided that this is what we would do. The times compelled me to make the decision. I am a person who believes that we are not as divided as we like to think we are, or as the media tells us we are, or as our partisan leaders sometimes instruct us to be in order to raise money to move forward with whatever these different agendas are. I'm a man of the people. So I like to talk to people no matter their political stripe, no matter their background, no matter their level of work or non-work, where they live. And so as I've been doing doors in this district, talking to people, I'm okay that they might start with, well, what are you, a Democrat or a Republican? My answer is, I'm a human being who wants to talk to you about the issues that face Maine in this Senate district. And I hope that we can get past all of that and talk about what's important to you in your life. And after a 20-minute conversation, we will find some common ground. And often I might say, when was the last time someone showed up at your door to talk to you about how you feel about the state of affairs in our state or in our country? And they go, maybe never. And I say, well, then I'm standing here and we're going to have this conversation. And I hope by the end of it, you will vote for me to be your senator, because I will always be this accessible to you. It doesn't matter what your party is or what your background is. If I am going to represent the people of Senate District 14 in the Maine State Senate, then I'm going to represent all of them. And that means I have to get to know what's on their minds, what their concerns are. And it doesn't matter to me if they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green, Libertarian, if they've got a Trump sign on their lawn, if they've got a support CMP corridor on their lawn or a no CMP corridor on their lawn sign. I don't care. I'm going to knock on their door and we're going to have a conversation, because if I win this seat, and knock on wood, I hope that all the work that we and the volunteers and you, Betsy, are putting in to make sure that we can hold this seat, then I will be able to continue the work that I've done for 8 years, representing all the people and making sure that in Augusta, we have a person who can work with anyone as well, who can be strategic, who can build relationships with Republicans and Democrats, who can work with folks as disparate in their political views as Governor Paul LePage and Governor Janet Mills and everywhere in between. So the time is here to make sure that we have people who understand what the oath of office means, who understand that the Constitution isn't something to pick and choose from, and who understand that we have to take responsibility for our own mistakes and not point the finger and blame other people. And by all means, we have to stop calling people out of their names, giving them nicknames, making them, dehumanizing them, just so that we can like put them in a box and therefore use them as some punching bag for whatever our radical agenda might be on the left or the right.
Yeah, no. And you know, that's been one of the hallmarks, Craig, that I think you've had that I've admired so much, which is not just the ability, because you have that, but the belief that it's so important to talk to everyone. And I know that there are a lot of people, when I know that you had a relationship with Paul LePage, and there's a lot of people who raised their eyebrows and said, you know, what's he doing talking to Paul LePage? And I believe that you were part of the, weren't you the person who got him to sign the GMO labeling bill and work on, you know, the food sovereignty stuff? Wasn't that part of, because of your relationship with him? And so my question really is, you know, it's who you are, right? When you just described that so beautifully. But why do you think it's so important now? And why do you think we're so far from it? Why are we so far away? I mean, I feel like you do, but I feel like we're so far away from being able to have those conversations. And I agree. I think the divide, and I've said this, and you and I've talked about this, is not right and left. The divide is more and more becoming up and down. And the people in that up are very few and far between. And so the rest of us have a lot in common, I think. But so tell me, what is it that drives you? Why do you think we're why do you think people feel it's so hard right now?
Well, I think it's easy to put people in a box. It's easy to say that the other side is the problem. Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's an entire mindset. You know, in the wake of what happened to our country on January the 6th, the media still feels necessary to describe everything in divisive terms. The Republicans are having a civil war. No, they're not. The Democrats, you know, can't come together. True, we can. The country is too divided. No, it really isn't. It's the platforms that we pay attention to. We sit in front of our Black mirrors now all the time because of the pandemic, and people don't get out as much, don't go to the grocery store as much, don't have community public suppers as much, you know, don't hang out in restaurants and get to socialize in those ways as much. And so we sit in our echo chambers and we choose what we want to consume, and it reinforces something in us, and it becomes insidious. And in fact, if we were to just step away from it for a second and say, why am I playing into this? When there's so much more that we have in common than that divides us, it becomes a game of a race to the bottom for who is most responsible for the problems that we face. And it's always a deflection away from ourselves, away from our own inputs. You only get what you give. Yeah. And if you are constantly looking for someone else to blame or looking for a demon to sort of cast as the person or the entity or the party that has to be taken out, we become a country where we don't trust each other anymore. Yeah. And then there's this thing called the diminution of the truth, which I've always said to kids in middle school and high school, whenever I speak to them, one of the last things that I say is always tell the truth. And I remember a parent of a child came up to me after one of those conversations, and he said, you know, I've never really heard a politician ask people to tell the truth because politicians are known to be serial liars. And I said, that's unfortunate. I'm not a serial liar. The truth is the most important thing. I went to Harvard, and our motto was Veritas, which is truth. I'm a Sagittarius. We believe in truth, that there is a
Yeah.
truth, and that and the truth is not relative. Facts are facts, and what's true is true. And just because people don't see the truth doesn't mean the truth doesn't exist. And so the diminution of the truth has been a real pandemic in and of itself across society. The fact that people can lie and not even have it be called a lie, and have people believe the lie and repeat the lie and spread the lie, and then say that this is what's true because this is what I've heard in all of the echo chambers where I consume information. I have to dispel that with poetry, with a few words here or there, because what people know is that we all need to eat. We all bleed red. Some of us can't sleep very well all the time. We all need rest. We all need water. We would all like to breathe clean air. We would all like to have a job or enough resources where we can put food on the table for ourselves and our families and not wonder where the next meal is coming from. And so, because these are the commonalities that we have to continue to work on creative solutions in the middle of this pandemic, in the middle of these divisions, in the middle of hyperpartisanship. We have to come together as human beings and keep faith with one another, because that's how we get out of this. Toni Morrison is one of my all-time favorite writers, and she recently passed away. She's a Nobel laureate, Pulitzer Prize winner. Someone asked her why she wrote the books that she wrote, because her prose is poetry, her subject matter is painful, it's hard, reading her work is a challenge, it's dense. She said, I write the books I want to read. And so I run for office so that I can be the politician that I would like having represent me. And that's one of the reasons why I just had to step up, because I felt like this was a time where I wanted to ensure, if at all possible, if the votes come in, that I could be represented by someone who cares about all the people and will not play the games that are supposed to move me forward in some ambitious political career. I just want to serve the people day in and day out, work hard, do the right thing, bring my conscience, my knowledge, what my mother would call her wisdom, to the table, and make sure that we are working on behalf of all Mainers.
Well, and I think part of what's so amazing about you and so attractive is that you do have the heart of a poet. And I think that there's this, right now we're living in a politics based in fear. And we have this moment where, COVID has moved us where we can have a politics of the heart and compassion and kindness in each other. So that's part of what you have always brought to politics. And I think hopefully there's going to be more and more people who are desirous of that now. So speaking of COVID, how could we not, right? In this pandemic, so many inequities and injustices have been laid bare. And again, it's not necessarily only due to the pandemic, but we just see them in stark relief. So I'm just curious, what are some of those things that you see that that you want to work on, that you want to bring solutions to, or continue to do the work that you were doing so incredibly as a state rep? Are there things that pop out for you from that?
Well, we see the disparities in the way that COVID affects people of different backgrounds. I don't know if it's genetic or biological or just as a result of institutional and structural racism. But we know that in Maine, 1 in 20 cases, 1 in 25 cases impacted people of color. And that means that we have to make sure that resources are targeted in those communities. In Maine, we know it's the whitest state in the country, and people of color comprise a mere 5% of the population. But we are also in some of the most essential work. We process food, we are in wet care, we are taking care of people in nursing homes, we are cleaning up the floors in the hospitals. We are doing the work that is largely unseen and unheard. We are on the front lines of even in the service industries. And so that has put us at increased risk for exposure. And then biologically, something happens with us with this virus where it just literally ravages our systems in a way that it might not in other places. But this virus is unrelenting. And so we have to make sure that people have access to healthcare. We have to make sure that people have access to appropriate prevention. People have access to PPE that they need. And I want to get beyond using sort of public health mitigation measures as ways for, again, us to have wars and to be divided with each other based upon nonsense, as far as I'm concerned. This is the second pandemic that I have lived through and have had to deal with the consequences of communities being ravaged. And so I know that the CDC at the federal level is always a little behind. They have to have certain evidence to back up the recommendations that they make. Common sense will tell us a lot before the science does. But I was wearing a mask last year at this time, because even though it was all about droplets and washing hands and droplets, and masks have to be reserved only for direct care workers on the front lines because we just didn't have enough of them in distribution, I was making cloth masks and wearing 2 or 3 at a time, because it was very clear to me that this was an airborne virus. And that wasn't what we were told from our leaders. But I went and I started to research what was happening in Southeast Asia. So if this originated there, then there has to be some science there. And so I went through the webs and I looked at all of the places that are not reported on even cable news, mainstream media, anywhere else. And it was very clear to me from the evidence presented that this was an airborne virus and that masks would protect us from it. And even some of the health officials in Southeast Asia looked at what was going on in Italy at the time, looked at what was going on in New York at the time, and said, I think the biggest mistake they're making is that they're not pushing masks, because masks are going to at least prevent transmission of the virus until we can get a hold on how we can treat it or how we can vaccinate against it. And so we need treatments. We need a bunch of us to continue to come together to mitigate against the spread of it. We need to be wearing our masks. I don't care how controversial that is for certain people. It works. Back in the early 90s, late 80s, you know, there was another piece of material that needed to be used to prevent transmission of a disease that was also deadly and killed people. And there was a lot of resistance to that. But you just keep moving forward. And the proof is in the pudding. Mask wearing has reduced transmission rates. Mask wearing has reduced transmission of the common cold. Mask wearing has reduced the transmission of the seasonal flu. Mask wearing has reduced my, you know, allergies. And so for me, I wear a mask at home on a regular basis when my husband is around. He's a healthcare worker, and we are extra careful that we are not transmitting this virus between each other, because we don't know if we have it. You can't get tested every single day. Not every single test is going to be accurate. We know that there are errors in all of that. But what's clear to me is that masks work. And so the more we wear masks and the more people have access to scientific information and public health information and epidemiological information and not political posturing, we can make sure that we protect ourselves from these new variants and these new mutations that are more contagious and therefore more deadly. We're not out of the woods yet. And I've watched a doctor on a network from start to finish. He's always bringing the cold, hard facts to the table. He said right away that the next 2 to 4 weeks are going to continue to be a problem if we are not mitigating with mask wearing, social distancing, and good hygiene. So all of those things need to be directed. All that education has to be targeted toward our most vulnerable, people who are disproportionately impacted, whoever they are. And that's just what we have to do if we want to keep Maine, you know, one of the places on the map that has the lowest rates in the country.
Great. Well, so let's pivot away from COVID for a minute. That's awesome. And I want to talk about some of the things that you're most proud of. You served 8 years as an incredible representative. You got amazing things done. As I mentioned before, you were the father of the food sovereignty movement. both as an organic farmer and also as a legislator. So what are some of the things that you feel most proud of in the work that you've done, and that you're going to propel forward into the Senate?
You know, we like to look at our accomplishments sometimes to say, look at what I did. I'm really proud of just the reputation that I have developed because of the way in which I go about doing my work. I read everything, I listen, I question, I try to be strategic with my questioning. You know, people come to the State House, and now it's different. I don't know what it's like to just do all Zoom public hearings, but
it's awful.
I imagine. But for the 8 years that I served, people would come into a committee room and they wanted to learn something. They weren't just there to testify on a bill. They wanted the committee members to pay attention, and they wanted the committee members to be prepared. And I was always that person who would do my homework and ask the kinds of questions that I thought needed to be asked, because the answers to the questions were as important as the questions themselves. They needed to be put into the public record. So I'm really just proud of the way I go about doing my work. As far as accomplishments, yes, having the first in the nation Maine Food Sovereignty Act passed, which allows for localities to decide whether or not they are going to allow traditional foodways and face-to-face, neighbor-to-neighbor transactions to take place around our most vital issue, food, without, you know, over regulation and too strong of a state hand in it all, was a really big deal. It's why I ran for office to begin with. And it's one of the reasons why I made sure to cultivate a good relationship with Governor Paul LePage, because whether we agreed on anything or not, he's the governor of the state. And if there was ever going to be an opportunity for me to get food sovereignty to his desk, I needed to make sure that I would be in a position to be able to ask him to sign it. And that is what happened. And so I'm extremely proud of that. In my last term, I finally got around to finishing the vision that I had for establishing a resolve to end hunger in Maine by 2030, which Governor Janet Mills signed into law. And that's a landmark piece of legislation as well. We know now with this pandemic that there is more hunger on the rise in Maine and across the country than ever before. And it was already a challenge. 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 children, depending upon the statistics you read, go to bed hungry every night. And in a state like Maine that has all of this land, we fish, we farm, we take care of each other, we have our neighbors' backs, we love thy neighbor as thyself. It just made no sense to me that there was so much hunger in the state. So I'm really proud that that resolve is bringing stakeholders together as we speak to strategize, to come up with a strategy and an actual plan to end hunger in Maine by 2030. Some say we should be doing it by 2025. I say, hey, the sooner the better. But we needed to be, you know, realistic in getting the bill passed. And so I made it 2030, and it was a unanimous vote from start to finish. I would also say that in my second term, I'm an adoptee. I was adopted when I was 16 months old by 2 beautiful parents, and I have an adopted sister. And I've always fought for the rights of children, but especially adopted people. And so in my second term, I passed a bill that was the first in New England to outlaw the unauthorized custody transfers of children, which is called rehoming. Yeah. And that was a situation where literally a child could be turned over to a stranger in the parking lot of Walmart with a simple, you know, piece of paper signed by a lawyer and a representative of some kind. And no court could oversee that transaction. And so these kids were basically being trafficked to strangers. And there's no federal law against it, and there was no state law against it. And so that was 2015, we passed that law. We overrode a veto from Governor Paul LePage. At the time, he, I think, vetoed every single bill that the legislature passed. And so we unanimously overrode that veto. And because that bill went into the books, Senator Angus King nominated me for an Angels in Adoption Award, which I was humbled to receive. I got to go to Washington, D.C. to receive that congressional award and meet and lobby with members of Congress on issues regarding children, adopted children, foster children in particular. And that is where, and in that moment, our Congresswoman, Shelley Pingree, introduced me to Representative John Lewis. And so I got to meet John Lewis as a result of the work that I had done in Maine on protecting the rights and the safety and welfare of adopted children in the state.
Extraordinary. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. I know we could talk for hours, but Craig, one of the things that I think is so extraordinary and remarkable and beautiful about you is the two examples you just gave, which is, you live the work that you do, as a farmer and feeding people. And for those of you who don't know, Craig doesn't do it in the legislature. His farm, he puts out extra food and just says, take it if you need it. He's always cooking jambalaya and amazing food for big crowds of people. And the same thing with the adoption, so it's such a holistic, authentic, beautiful approach, as you said, the thing you're most proud of to being a legislator. And I think for us in Maine, we are so fortunate to have someone like you to be the kind of model legislator that we wish all of Congress was populated with, that all the state legislators, someone who walks the talk, someone who believes we should talk to everybody, and someone, most importantly, who listens. And the other thing is, I think you're really wonderful at finding a really good idea when you hear it. and that's awesome. So Craig, just for people who are watching, anybody, so if they want to help you, if they want to find out more about you, can you just give them I know it's March 9th is not far away. What are the things that they can look for? Where can they go to find out more, or if they want to help do that?
Thank you. March 9th is 3 weeks from yesterday. So if you go to hickmaninthesenate.com, you can sign up to make phone calls. You can sign up to do paid canvassing. You can sign up to help me put up signs. You can make a small contribution to our campaign. This is an all-in, all hands on the table effort to keep, hold, and retain this seat. And so I look forward to any voter who's watching in Senate District 14 to go to hickmaninthesenate.com and join us in making sure that we have leadership, integrity, compassion, transparency, and accountability in the State House.
And what else could you want? And if you aren't in Senate District 14, you can still help. You can still call, you can still make a donation, and you can still find Craig and figure out how you can help. Craig, I love you. I am so grateful for your this time together, and I really look forward to you being my senator.
Thank you, Betsy. Vote Hickman, March 9th.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.